Hey, this is Steph in 2026, a few years after these episodes for this season have been recorded. And I just wanted to say I'm changing the order of this season because I didn't realize that the podcast was actually going to stop after this season. And I really, truly don't want my episode to be the last episode of the podcast. I want other people's stories to be much more upfront and in people's faces than my own. So I'm going to change the order. I'm not going to re-edit this episode. So there'll be some things that talk about the other episodes in this season and know that this is consciously out of place. And that's okay because that's how it needs to be. Hope that makes sense. Enjoy the episode and thank you for listening.
Hello there, dear Geopats listener. Normally, Stephanie Fuccio is here to take you around the world in unique and interesting ways by introducing you to expats and geopats. But, well, today we got a little bit of a treat for you. In this episode, the tables are going to be turned, and Stephanie is going to be interviewed by Melissa Lent. In this season, Steph is talking with expats who grew up with one or more immigrant parents, and she's having them wrestle with the question of, did that impact their later expat life? So far, she's spoken with Allison, who has a Chilean mom, Chelsea, an American with a German mom, and George, a Canadian with two Greek parents. Well, today, it's Steph's turn. Steph, as you know, is an American who grew up with two Italian parents. In this conversation, her and Melissa, they discuss work ethic, fitting in, standing out, striving, and much, much more. So let's listen to Melissa Lent and Steph's wonderful conversation now.
Hey there, I am your guest host, Melissa Lent. I am the host of the Tired in My 20s podcast, and I'm also a researcher and multimedia specialist at a public policy think tank. First, we have to talk a little bit about your expat life. People aren't totally aware. They can get a sense, and you're moving all the time, to be honest, I think this year. So why don't you tell people where you're at currently right now?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Right now I'm in Valencia, Spain. I'm still not even sure of the verb tense. I have been overseas for the majority of the past 20 years. Most of that was spent in Asia teaching English and then on the testing side of language, testing. That's redundant. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband and I moved to Germany for a different life and the world turned upside down. And so we've accidentally turned into digital nomads until something else comes along. We're moving every 3 months now, different countries and things. And yeah.
I've heard a little bit about your experiences. If you take a wide angle view of that, it's kind of like, ooh, expat, moving around every few months, like exploring the world. But it is quite stressful as well, isn't it?
I think it's mostly stressful. I don't know how people do this for long term. Like, again, we're doing this as a Band-Aid until something else comes along. But it's really hard to jump around this much to totally different places. And once you get kind of comfortable, then you're changing again. Like for me, a year or 2 years or 3 years is super comfortable in a place. But like 3 months is like barely finding the perfect coffee shop.
It does take a while to get used to a place. I guess you did get those years in Asia. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about what specific countries you were teaching in and living in?
A lot. It was the majority of the time. So it was like China, Japan, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam. I think those are the major notes. And there's other vacations and things in longer vacations in places. But those are the main bits.
Mm-hmm. What was the reason why you decided to move to Asia in the first place and kind of start that expat life?
Actually, I used teaching as a way to live overseas. And then I actually fell in love with teaching for a very long time. But yeah, no, it was a way to live longer in places. It was a tool at first.
Yeah. Well, even though you're not a an English teacher anymore, teaching English to people. You still teach a lot of people through your podcast. So I definitely see the teacher side of you still there at its core, wanting to share things with people and make people like aware of things, also through your newsletter and things like that. So definitely see those teacher vibes continuing. Why don't we get into a little bit of what the heart of this conversation really is, which is about the immigrant parents part. So where are your parents from?
My father's from Naples in Italy, and my mother's from Calabria, from a tiny, I guess you would call it village called San Domizio Coron, which is an Albanian enclave in southern Italy.
So your parents, they were both from Italy, and then did they move to the United States? Did they meet in Italy? Did they meet in the United States? How did that happen?
It's funny because there wasn't ever a lot of talk about this in the household growing up. But what I have heard, which may or may not be true, is that they both came over at different times. My dad came over to the US when he was 12 with family, and my mother came over when she was 35. So significantly later in her, not 35, sorry, 21, I think, in her early 20s, with a few family members, but not all, because both sides of my family have gigantic, like 9 children kind of families. Yeah. So she came over with a few relatives in her early 20s, and they met in beauty school in Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, beauty school. So yeah. were they both studying to become, I guess, like beauty technicians or some, I don't know what the official terms are, but
I don't know either. But apparently they did it. They went through the whole program, and they actually had a salon together for a few years.
Wow. But that was before you were born, or?
Yeah. My mom ended up being, I guess, allergic to a lot of the chemicals, because this is like 50s and 60s when they were doing the big bouffants and all this really intense chemical treatments and things. So they had to move on to other work.
Oh, really? What did they move on to, I guess, by the time that you were born?
I think my dad was a security person at the docks. And that's going to raise some eyebrows for folks who are familiar with New York and Italians in New York. And I don't really know what more to say about that. Because like I said, there's a lot of unknown in my family history that I still don't quite understand. But as far as I know, he worked at the docks, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, which you could do in the 70s. Unlike now, it's super, super duper hard.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like the stay-at-home mom is the stay-at-home working mom. And so mom is working maybe like on her laptop, has like a while also taking care of the kids. I almost feel like that's what some people consider a stay-at-home mom these days. You're still working while you're a stay-at-home mom. You still have your side hustle somewhere, or like you have your freelance business, or like you have this or that. So, but I do feel like there's still some like stay-at-home moms that are truly, there to really take care of the children full time and then things like that. But I don't know. But even though you some of the, I guess, areas in your family history are a bit fuzzy right now, I did want to ask, once you were there, started living in this world and grew up with your parents, how was that like? And what this episode or what this conversation is trying to explore really is those values or viewpoints that you kind of grew up with. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you grew up, and, as you grew up, how those kind of values that maybe your parents had were instilled in you, or that you learned about, or absorbed. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, there's basically 2 parts in my brain to my growing up with my parents, my immigrant parents. And one was in New York, where we were surrounded by a lot of family that lived there. And the other one was in Pennsylvania, where we were basically kind of isolated family wise, and where my parents worked a lot more, because they switched from just my dad working to them owning a restaurant. And we all know how much restaurant people work, like around the clock, crazy hours. So there's like 2 distinct periods there. But even with those 2 periods and varying experiences with the extended family, there was a lot of their work ethic, like seriously, and we've talked about this off mic a lot, a lot of their work ethic got into me, even though I didn't even realize it for the longest time. Like when I moved from Pennsylvania to Los Angeles, and I was like new to everything. And I was just, I was like, how much can I work was basically how I entered the place. I was like, what kind of opportunities are there? And then as soon as I found them, I started collecting jobs because I was like, I need to make sure that I don't end up in a bad situation. Like I have to work. The only way to do this is to work my way out of poverty, like work basically. So I was like, I didn't know another way. Like I didn't expect anybody to do anything for me. I didn't expect to be handed situations. I was just like, I'm going to work until I can breathe, basically. And I think a lot of that came from them coming over and kind of building their life from nothing. And, but I didn't know that growing up. Growing up, I just thought, oh gosh, you guys are so different. Everybody sees that we're so different all the time. Everywhere we go, you look different, you dress different, you sound different. I was probably, to be quite honest, I was probably a little embarrassed of them for a long time. I didn't realize the good impact that they had on me.
Well, there's a lot of questions that I have, ranging from the most basic to the most serious, I guess. So starting with a basic question, what kind of restaurant did your parents have? Because I'm curious about
that. Lucio. They had an Italian restaurant. It was mostly a pizzeria because, let's be honest, in the middle of a small town, Pennsylvania, where they lived, it was really hard to get the amazing ingredients that they needed to do anything super fancy. So they had a pizzeria.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And I knew that it was in a town. I didn't think that we were going to jump to. And then my parents opened a sushi restaurant in the middle of Pennsylvania. But yeah, a pizzeria, that's nice. It's kind of like your local pizza joint. I quite like that. And you were saying that something that caught my interest, you were saying, oh, we are so different from everyone around us. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Was there not really a big immigrant presence where you were living, or was there not a big like Italian presence, or like?
Okay, so I was born in Brooklyn, and my brother and sister are older than me, so they were already in existence. But that was only 3 years of my life, and I don't remember much of that. And then we moved to Long Island, New York, and like I said, we had a lot of family there, and close enough where when we went into the city, to New York City, we had a lot more family there. So it wasn't as we weren't super isolated or as we were there. But when we moved to Pennsylvania, we were in this tiny, then it was a borough. I don't know what it is now, called East Petersburg. It's about an hour and a half outside of Philly. And that hour and a half is like crossing the country culturally. Like you go in the 80s and 90s, it was extremely conservative, extremely go-getter kind of status is everything, materialistic, squish everybody beneath you kind of suburbia. So it was like probably one of the biggest culture shocks of my life was going from New York to that small town, Pennsylvania, and just like kind of searching around for people that were real. Cause I felt like everybody was trying to be something they weren't and trying to get something at other people's expense. And even at a young age, it just felt weird to me to be that. And they all seemed unhappy. Like, I hate to be stereotypical about suburbs being empty in like people being empty inside, but it felt like people were empty inside. It was very strange. Sorry, I lost the question. I started going off on a small town tangent.
No, it makes sense. I mean, it's a stereotype, or I guess an idea that's floating around there about suburbs, I guess, for a reason. And you saw maybe the most extreme version of that kind of negative aspect of what suburb living is like. I was asking you a bit about what did make it seem like your family was standing out from the crowd. And I guess what you're saying is that there wasn't as big of an immigrant population there than obviously that there is in New York. By a long shot, there wasn't. I don't know what it's like now, but at that point we were the ethnic minority, which seems really weird to say, but there was seriously, because that part of Pennsylvania at that time, don't know now, but at that time was incredibly
It still was like Pennsylvania Dutch influence. There were a lot of like descendants from Germany and so forth. And it was very not us. And so when we came in with the like pasta and the potato salad without mayonnaise and the frizzy hair and the accents that my parents had, people were like, I don't know what to do with you all. They were very confused and very, in a polite way, very rude. Because what's different and what's different is often condescended to or treated less than. And so there was like, I'm pretty sure I'm autistic, and I had a lot of troubles like learning to read and like developmental issues at school. And there was this implication that because my parents were immigrants, and this is all unsaid, but because they were immigrants, I was clearly stupider. So they were just going to automatically put me in, which is not a word. I know stupider is not a word, but it should be. They were just going to put me in the lower level because that's where I deserve to be. And I kind of kicked and kicked and kicked, and they tested me and they figured out that I wasn't actually at that level. And so they kept me in there, but they were frustrated because I wasn't performing in the way that they were used to or that they were comfortable with. But it was just it. And I only realized this like much later. I'm like, why did they think that I was like this? Like there were other silent kids in the class, but they were more normal than like I stuck out because of X, Y, and Z. So it was very weird. Like in retrospect, there were a lot of, I guess they'd be called microaggressions today, but none of that was talked about or, to my knowledge, back then in those circles. So it was just like, this is what's happening, and we have to try to just keep going forward because we're here to make our lives better, kind of thing.
Right. And that also seems to be a value that kind of arises not just from moving to an entirely new country and having to work, as you said, and I do want to get back to this concept of work, but also people's perception of you, right, and your family, and then what viewpoints or, maybe survival strategies arise from that. Because, I mean, did that affect the way that you and your family behaved or saw themselves? Or, I mean,
really good question. I don't know, because I don't think any of this was really obvious at the time. Maybe it was to the adults in the room, but to us kids, we were just like uprooted and shifted over, and we were just trying to like, do what kids do, like have fun and make friends and all that kind of stuff. So all of the weirdness, like I said, just kind of came up years and years later as other situations happened, and I started to see other people put in similar situations. And especially when my friends started to have kids and I started to see how their kids were treated. And I was like, wait a minute. Oh my gosh. And then it starts to make sense. But at the time, I think we were just trying to get by, to, live the best life we could, kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting things that you've just said, going back even to your point of moving from New York to Pennsylvania in the first place. It's like one state away or a few states away. And yet the culture is totally different. I mean, even with culture within a certain state is entirely different in the US. Yeah. I think like if you go to upstate New York versus actually being in New York City. So it's almost like a culture shock. Maybe going to New York, obviously there is quite a culture shock if you've been in one country your whole life that mostly has one type of people, and then you go to a place where, there's so many different types of cultures and people and backgrounds, but at least in that way you can kind of feel there's something for everyone, while going to Pennsylvania and not really having anyone like that can feel a lot more jarring, I think, in some ways. So that's something that interesting that I picked up from there. But going back to this concept of work and trying to get by and survival, I'm wondering if you can tell me, once you moved, eventually you moved to LA, then you eventually started becoming, you started your expat life as well. And I'm wondering, how did those values move with you through life, and which ones do you feel like especially affected your journey as an expat, as you were going along with that as well?
The work one's huge, but also because we were treated so strange for so long, when I moved to LA and I wasn't, it was strange. And so I kind of went, okay, kid and candy store, let's make the most of this opportunity. But then I moved, funny enough, to a small town to finish my college degree. And I was back in the awkward situation of being the weirdest one in the room. I knew how to keep going, find my people, and do the things I wanted to do. So by the time I went overseas after that, to places that were very, very different, like when I went to Taiwan, even though there was a pretty big culture shock, and I never really found my grounding, I was able to kind of separate being uncomfortable and still having fun is so light, isn't it? Having an enjoyable time, getting things out of it, still trying to find people I wanted to connect with. Like, it didn't stop me. Like, I guess, oh wow, I never thought about this before, but I guess the discomfort was normal to me. So it didn't stop me, where I think some expats might hit that for the first time and go, wow, I'm going to need to leave because I don't feel good here. For me, I was like, oh yeah, I know this. Let's go. And I take it with me and keep doing things anyway and hope that at least would come and go.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Do you feel that because of that, you made decisions that maybe would be different than a typical, American in Asia or whatever country? Do you think that maybe were you able to have different experiences that you feel like maybe other expats would be hesitant to try at first, or how did this feeling of being okay in discomfort affect your expat life more specifically?
There's a couple of things I need to bring up, and this is the uncomfortable part, why I've never really talked about this before on camera, on audio, on the mic. I don't have an active relationship with the vast majority of my family, and I basically haven't talked to my family other than a few weird momentary blips since I moved from Pennsylvania when I was 20. So, but because of the time, it's weird. Like I've gotten to the place where I can see how things were, and I can see them as people and detached from the confusion and those negative emotions that might come from not having an active relationship. And that distance also, and I'm not saying this like it's a good thing, because that was not the goal for me, to completely detach from everybody that I knew as a child. But not having an active relationship made it easier for me to be an expat. Like the expats that I met who had a very tight-knit family had a really hard time, because, to be quite honest with you, if you have that kind of support system, why would you leave it? Like, that's something that people crave and search for their whole lives. For me, I didn't. And that gave me the ability, fortunately or unfortunately, to, as you said, like do things that a lot of folks wouldn't have the emotional ability to do, because I didn't have a pull back to the US in a family sense. I had other pulls that made it hard to stay away at the beginning, but it wasn't a familial pull of this is going on, or this is happening, or we miss you, or you're missing that comfort of home. Like that wasn't a thing that I had to consider. So that was a huge part of my ability to stay so often, to move around to different places, to put myself in risky situations and not be worried that the X, Y, and Z person would need to come collect me if all went wrong, because they wouldn't, because they wouldn't even know anything had happened. So yeah, I think that played a huge factor in all of it.
All right. I do have 2 follow-up questions for that. One being, as much as you want to answer in terms of this confusion that before you moved that was maybe causing this, you wanting to distance yourself from your family? I don't know if that was tied to this conversation that we've been having about the different values that can perhaps come from the immigrant experience, good or bad.
The difficulty in talking about this is I decided early on I never wanted to tell anybody else's story but my own, because I can't pretend to understand what my parents or relatives are thinking and feeling. And this was not my decision. I was basically estranged as soon as I left the house to move to California. And there has never been an active discussion as to what happened. So I don't, it wasn't my distancing. I think eventually it might have been, or me deciding to move to Los Angeles was my active role in that, maybe. But I never in a million years thought that would be, I don't even know the right analogy, the end of having a blood family. I don't know. It confused me a lot at the time. But yeah, it was not an active distancing.
I see. I see. That makes sense. Well, the other follow-up question that I had for you was if you could give us an example of when you were talking about there were certain situations where maybe you were being bolder or a bit riskier. And what were some of those kinds of situations that you feel like because of this relationship that you had or didn't really have as much with your family, you were kind of able to pursue a bit more than maybe your typical expat?
Oh, sure. I think even just in my first move over to Asia, Taiwan's so modern and so not middle of nowhere, but I didn't know that. So even just like signing up to go teach for a year in a place from an online job ad and then like booking a ticket for a week later and meeting my boss at the airport. Like, these are all things that seems really strange to most people. Like, it's like, how did you trust all of that? And all I could think was, well, if that doesn't work out, I'll just come back and then I can keep working and figure out what else to do. And like those situations of like the places that I've gone and the people that I've met and the situations that I've been in. I remember when I was traveling around Bratislava, was it Bratislava? Somewhere in Eastern Europe, and I booked a hotel for the price and not location. Probably the last time I did that. I was just walking around with this giant backpack my flight was delayed and I got in really late. And so I was like walking around this neighborhood that I knew nothing of. And this is pre-cell phones and all that. So I was just going off of the maps on the street and I'm thinking, wow, this is probably quite dangerous for me to be walking around. I'm clearly a tourist. Like, I am a moving target right now. And I was just like, just use city smarts. I had my key in my hand and I was ready if anybody tried to attack me. And I was, making eye contact, following couples and doing all of these like smart behaviors to try to not have bad situations happen. But I don't know. I feel like I put myself in more like minor and major situations like that because I didn't have to worry about anybody cleaning up my own mess. Like, I was the one who would always have to clean it up. So I'm like, let's go. Let's do what we want to do because I'll deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, even on that point of I'll deal with it, or, if something happens, I'll just go somewhere else and work. And this idea of taking care of things by yourself and also working very hard, which I feel like are both things that we've mentioned during this conversation, are huge values that have come about from having immigrant parents and having that kind of experience. And maybe this is one of the last questions I'll ask you since we're wrapping up our conversation a little bit here. But you talked about this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could tell me more about how this concept of work and trying to work as hard as you can and get by and do all of these things, how that value really affected your expat life.
Oh, massively. Especially in the TEFL industry. I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way. There are a fair bit of backpackers that like to go and teach English in a place and to barely show up for work, or to show up for work not really cognitively ready that day, shall we say. Like they'll just show up and be like, hey, I'm here to do this so I can stay here, or I can be here for a little while. Or there's a very fairly big sized contingent, not all of them, but a fairly big sized contingent of the TEFL industry that is not serious about what they're doing. And the industry plays on that, and they take advantage of that financially. So it's a dance. But for me, even though I was initially using teaching English to stay in places longer, I couldn't not do a good job. Like there were people in my classrooms, and there were things to be done. Like I can't, when people try to hire me even now for something quick and simple, I'm like, let me refer you to someone, because I can't. And I know you're smiling because I think you're like this too, Melissa. I can't half-ass anything. Like I have to go deep into something and do it well. And that's always something that has been a huge part of me. Like there's like sloppy and not knowing the full realm that task or that thing could do is just not in me. I can do sloppy, but it's not sloppy in necessarily everybody's eyes, more so in my eyes. I don't know. It's just not digging in is not part of my DNA. And I think that's a huge component of my parents, and they're just watching them constantly just dealing with shit and coming to the top, like still focusing on what they wanted and just constantly like pushing through all the bullshit. I feel like pushing through all the bullshit is a huge thing that I got from them that has helped me push through a lot of the bullshit of being an expat and dealing with the bureaucracy in places that don't make sense, as if bureaucracy does in other places. But I mean, just, yeah, I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, totally. Where does bureaucracy make sense?
Right?
Where's the country where we're like, oh, I love the bureaucracy,
right? I think the people who enforce it, or the people who make it, it makes sense to them because it keeps them in their cushy place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the rest of us,
yeah. No, but this is really interesting. And we have talked a little bit about this before getting on this conversation. I think it's even the reason why we decided to have this conversation, or you invited me perhaps in the first place, because we were talking about this. And I can definitely relate. I feel like there's almost a different standard or expectation that sometimes, immigrant kids place on themselves, or kids of parents who are immigrants, where it's kind of like, okay, what I saw growing up was that you don't stop working no matter what. And it's not good enough to settle for being okay. Like you have to be the best. Like you have to strive for the best. Part of this, I feel like, comes from this American dream concept that more and more I'm wondering whether it exists, but, or maybe not in the way that most people think it does. But it's also, I feel like a survival thing as well, in terms of you were talking about, sticking out. And it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to be the best, do the best that I can do so that people don't question me anymore on whether I'm allowed to be here. And I think that also plays a part of it as well. And so I do think that a lot of immigrant kids take that and really take that to heart. Even if, for example, my parents didn't really try to place those expectations on me because they knew the expectations that were placed on themselves, and maybe they didn't want the same things. It didn't really matter at a certain point. At some point, it's something within me that makes it really hard to come out of and to reject in a way, because in a way it can be helpful. And I think, for you, in some ways it's been helpful in terms of like, really making the most out of your experience and working hard and, really establishing yourself. On the other hand, what does this lead to? There's a lot of overwork that happens, a lot of stress, a lot of burnout, a lot of thinking that maybe you're not amounting to the standard that you've placed for yourself internally that doesn't externally exist. And yeah, I can see that you want to comment.
A lot of not asking for or demanding what everybody else is getting too. Cause I don't know if you've done that, but I've kind of like watched, especially early on in the workplace. And I was kind of watching going, wait, they're getting this, or they're saying no to this, or they're like knowing the boundaries that you're allowed to have and the expectations of things that you should be getting. And that was a huge wake up call for me. I was like, oh, I can do that. That's interesting.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. I remember watching a rom-com early in my 20s and seeing one of the female characters, like there was something that went wrong with the impending relationship. And she was so devastated that I don't remember what movie it was, but I remember, I'll never forget this. She stopped going to work for a few days and her life started to crumble. And I'm like, wait, what? You stopped going to work over a guy? Like, what? Are you like nailed into your apartment? Like, why did you stop going? Like, it just floored me. Like, I kind of lost a few minutes in the movie because I was so floored that she had given all of that energy to that guy in that relationship. I was like, no, honey, you got to do stuff. Go.
Yeah. But what does that mean? I mean, it's kind of like then in your own personal life, is it, never stopping, even when there are emotional things that we deal with in life, like considering work to be at the center or focal point of our lives and kind of like living to make sure that we can complete that work, even though there's so much to life outside of work. And it's like, I feel like these past few years, I've been really reconsidering my relationship to work and kind of like, okay, were we meant in this life to do everything that we can to work as much as possible? Or is that an idea that has been instilled in us, maybe from society and capitalist society, especially, and, you know, maybe from this immigrant parent experience. And, you know, it does feel like that. It does feel that, sometimes we've been conditioned a certain way to act a certain way or think a certain way, but then thinking about all the things outside of that. Am I not supposed to live my life to spend time with the people that I love and explore and even just do nothing? And the kind of
dirty
freedom
word
that comes, I know, the freedom that comes towards pursuing something, not to be good at it, but just to do it, or pursuing nothing at all.
Yeah, that's true. And now in my 50s, looking back at that movie, I would say, don't waste time on the guy. Don't waste time on work. If you're going to take that time off, go do something you enjoy. That has nothing to do with the guy who's clearly playing you. I mean, so just like option 3, like both of those are toxic. Go over there and go enjoy your life.
Yeah, definitely. Well, great. I mean, is there anything else that you wanted to say, Steph, about this whole topic that maybe I didn't get to ask you about?
No, I think we covered a lot of it.
All right.
I feel good about today.
I'm really glad. I mean, I also do have stuff to think about today, and I really enjoyed hearing about your experience. I'd heard bits and pieces from you, but it was nice being able to hear more. And I think that is pretty relatable for a lot of people as well. And I think a lot of people think the same.
Thank you. And thank you for being in the interviewer's seat. It's as strange as it is to be on this side right now in my own podcast, I really appreciate the perspective that you brought to this and that you were willing to do this, and so early in the day as well.
Well, early for me, yes. It is 7 a.m., but it's okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. That I usually, many days I wake up at 6 these days, so it's not too bad. I know it's hard, right? But there's something nice about waking up early. I don't do it every day, but some days. Is there any kind of Geopat's social media or website that I should plug as well?
No. Well, no, it's all under my name because everything keeps changing. So at Steph Fuccio. There we go. Right there. If you're looking in the video, STEPHFUCCIO. This is the end of this season, and we're going to have another podcasting season in a couple of months.
All right. Sounds good. Well, it was Really great talking to you, Steph. I'm so glad that you got into the interviewee seat today and made it a little bit more about yourself, because I feel like it was super interesting to talk about. And yeah, I think that being able to discuss how these different experiences figure into the expat experience. I feel like there are a lot of people out here with the same experience, and it's kind of nice to talk about, but it's also kind of nice to see how people come into being an expat in different ways, and also how they navigate that as well. So thanks so much for talking today and being open about your experience.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you on the next season, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Oh boy, when Stephanie was talking about the unconscious bias in her schools, it really resonated with me, because I taught for years in different schools, and I had to always be asking myself, what is going on here? Am I actually seeing this problem clearly, or is my unconscious bias shining through? And it just gave me goosebumps to hear that. If this or any of the other episodes in this season have given you goosebumps, then I know Steph would love it if you could do her a big favor and share it with just one other listener. The next episode will be coming out when Stephanie starts her new season, which will be in the fall. So once again, dear listener, thank you all so very, very much, and we look forward to seeing you all here again. Bye-bye.